Okay, hello everybody. This is kind of part two of some of the predictions I'm making for this year. Now, I haven't gone a bundle on predictions because a lot of them really are hangovers from the book I wrote last year, because the predictions tend to run from 1st April to 1st April rather than the new year, because the spring equinox is really where it all gets going. So those are kind of still in full motion, and I think I'll do a recap of some of the things that have taken place and what hasn't taken place. But this that I'm going to be talking now, the cloud pivot strategy, is very much part of what I see happening, and you can already see this beginning to unfold in America and the UK, probably other places in Europe. Sorry, you can't totally see it there. It's the cloud pivot strategy, CLOWARD. This is the Wikipedia page. So it was a political strategy outlined in 1966 by American sociologists and political activists Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. So it can also be called accelerationism. That's another way of putting it. I think it's very much related to the concept of accelerationism. Let me tell you what it is, and then we'll jump into why I think it's important. So they wrote an article, and it was focused on forcing the Democratic Party, which in 1966 controlled the presidency in both houses, to take federal action to help the poor. So they thought that full enrollment of everyone eligible for welfare would produce bureaucratic disruption, chaos, collapse, fiscal disruption in local and state governments that would deepen existing divisions among elements in the big city democratic coalition, which is the white middle class, the working class, ethnic groups, and a growing minority poor. And to avoid a further weakening of that historic coalition, the National Democratic Administration would be constrained to advance a federal solution to poverty that would override the local welfare failures, local class and racial conflicts, and local revenue dilemmas, and basically lead to a universal basic income. So they wanted to accelerate the collapse of existing structures in terms of social welfare, social sort of housing, caring for the poor, blah, blah, blah. They wanted to create such disruption that social cohesion would be threatened. Now, they're talking mainly about the Democrats, but we can look at it as well in Europe as being the cohesion is already fragile between, definitely the kind of people who've either native Europeans or been here a long time versus the recent immigrants. There's already that friction of the illegal aliens sort of coming in America and in here, and also friction between the classes. They wanted to create more friction by overwhelming all the social structures and social welfare that would affect both the lower and upper classes, which would in the UK. If you affect the NHS, you affect pretty much everyone, because it only would be top tier who can afford private medical. And they wanted to create such chaos that the main government would have to step in and introduce a sort of universal basic income to calm the whole thing down. Here it says the ultimate objective of this strategy was to wipe out poverty by establishing a guaranteed annual income, which we now call UBI. It was questioned by a lot of people. Okay, you can read more on that. Now it's wider than just being focused on the Democrats or Labour. I think it's really interesting because what we see in the UK over the last few months of last year was all these councils going bankrupt. Nottinghamshire, certain councils in Essex. Now, a council would take care of a municipal area. They would take care of policing, education, bin collections, things like that. Generally, in the UK, the heads of councils get paid more than the Prime Minister. It's quite a gravy train. In many cases, they're going bankrupt because they're overwhelmed by the pension contributions needed to keep all the staff pensions and prior staff pensions going. But they're also overwhelmed because of problem with mass immigration, so much more demand on roads, schools, housing stock, etc. Not that they have anything to do with housing stock specifically, but they would control council housing, social housing, and they're going bankrupt. And I know in America, big cities like Detroit have been bankrupt for a long time, but it's beginning to affect more and more cities and states. So this is what they want to accelerate, the collapse of these, whether it be states, local councils, things like the NHS, things like Social Security. They want to accelerate the demise of these things and the chaos within them perhaps even the resentment towards them because of certain people being favored, as a way of disrupting the whole social fabric and then rolling out their UBI. So I think this Cloward Piven, Alex Jones talked about it a lot, that's why I found out about it actually, never really explains it, but I can see it's definitely something that's beginning to roll out. And it's logical with those huge waves of immigration, which I predict are going to get even more massive in America and here. It's going to collapse everything. They want to collapse everything, then they can bring out the UBI. When they bring out the UBI, only thing that's going to happen is hyperinflation. I've explained before, if you give everyone sort of £500 a month, you devalue that £500 and you remove too many people from the workforce, remove incentive to work. I mean, there's just so many ways you end up with a currency worth zero, which they probably want as well. Then you have the fact, I touched on this last broadcast, I didn't get it totally right. Gerald Celente always says that in an election year, they have to reduce interest rates. But as soon as they reduce interest rates, the dollar's going to crash. And we know already Saudi Arabia this week has signed up to the BRICS. The BRICS are going to develop their own SWIFT payment system. And it's more and more countries are wanting to move closer to BRICS. Obviously, you've got this like fake populist Javier Milei in Argentina who's moving away from BRICS, totally predictable. And so I think the dollar is moved like to 53 or somewhere percent of world currency exchanges. It's going lower and lower and lower. If this does happen, with the interest rates coming down, as we already see them going in the UK, and the dollar does collapse, well, that's kind of what we've all expected. So this could be a really big year. That's what I think there's going to be from my previous prediction. And because of the movement of Uranus and the triggering of Algol and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, huge likelihood of a big focus on war, whole of Middle East erupting. Can already see Houthi rebels, which I mentioned in my last broadcast. Iran, the big attack which was by ISIS. Well, we know who ISIS are. Just think ISIS. It's not Arabs. But anyway, a big attack on Iran. There's friction on the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, that whole region. It's going to get very, very contentious. I've always said Turkey's going to get drawn into that, and things are going to get worse in Ukraine as Russia takes territory, but they can't really take that defeat. So that's what I wanted to talk about first. I just wanted to say as well, Jeff Berwick said something quite interesting. They're always telling us about these migrant caravans that are sort of coming up from Guatemala, Costa Rica, whatever, moving through Mexico and then getting to the American border and going in. And he was saying he's lived in Mexico for a long time. I think it's over 10 years. He knows an awful lot of people in Mexico. And he doesn't know one who's ever seen one of these caravans. He doesn't think they exist. He thinks basically they all get flown up there. And I'm wondering, in the context of the UK, do the boats actually come across? Maybe a few token ones, so a few people can take note of them. But I mean, maybe that's a hoax as well. Maybe it's just a few token boats, but most of those people are brought in and aren't coming in on boats. So that could all be nonsense. I want to go to my Twitter. I think you can see there's journalist, age 33. Amazing how many times that comes up. Now, amazing Polly. What I said, remember, in my previous show, I said about so much of the alternate media now becoming almost mainstream, or just as bad as the mainstream, or becoming gatekeepers in themselves. And the accounts Thinking Slow and Amazing Polly are thinking along exactly the same lines as me. Thinking Slow has put up his list of who he thinks the kind of new established narrative repeaters are. And you can see he's got Tucker Carlson, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson. I've never liked any of those. I've always warned you against them. I've warned you against Tate. Rogan, never really liked them. Who else have he got here? Kissin, I've mentioned, who I don't like. He's also put Alex Jones in there. He's got Candace Owens, obviously John Campbell, I never paid any attention to. That's Scott Adams, the cartoon guy. This is Malhotra. Don't recognize all of these, actually, but quite a few in there. Let's see, Polly's updated her list as well, with who she thinks is there. I'll just go back. She asked for suggestions to add, and I said, what about Rose? What's his name? The guy that does... can't remember his first name. Brian Rose, I've written there, yes. He does the interviews with David Icke. I think David Icke could come in there because although he tells an enormous amount of truth, there's a certain amount of gatekeeping in terms of always, oh, what is a spiritual battle really? And oh, who are we fighting? Oh, well, you know, there's this web, and then there's another web, and another web, and in the middle it's a spider, and that controls everything, and everyone you think is involved is really just right on the outer edges, and it's not really them, and someone else is, you know, it's always very vague, and you can't fight your enemy if you don't know who they are, and I think there's a lot of obfuscation going on in terms of David Icke with who they are. Let's see, Polly's added a few new people. I also suggested they add Majid Nawaz, who I think should be in there. As you know, I said nothing's going to happen with this Epstein thing. Oh dear. Can't find where Polly put her updated list, but she had a few more people on there, which I thought were quite good. Yeah, people I would agree with. Yes, RFK should be on there as well. I think he's also part of the new controlled opposition. I'll have to try and find that other list by old Polly as well. But I think what I will say in defense of a lot of these people, not all, some I've never liked, but what I will say in defense is, just as cannabis is a gateway drug, or other softer drugs or a gateway drug, even alcohol can lead to other things. It's a very dangerous game to play, to have these people acting as semi-gatekeepers, because people are kind of hungry for this information. So once Alex Jones and even Russell Brand, maybe Tucker Carlson, once these people have given someone a sniff, they get super interested and they start looking into it more and more. So it's a gateway drug to the harder kind of conspiracy. So although these people may be the cannabis or the alcohol, once people are addicted to them, they're going to need more to keep quenching this desire for knowledge and excitement, and that'll lead them to the more conspiracies. So I don't think that works as a gatekeeping thing, because people always go looking for more. The committed people will go looking for more, and they'll stumble upon more. So that won't, so I don't think that kind of gatekeeping thing's going to actually work. So there you go. So I talk about Piven. A little correction, it was Dennis Kucinich that was the campaign manager that quit for RFK. It wasn't Dr. Shiva. As someone rightly pointed out, Dr. Shiva's always been skeptical. People like Alex are going to push massively Trump, and he's not going to do anything. All he'll do is get in, speak a good talk like he does. He's a great talker. He's very entertaining, but nothing is going to change. It's just going to make people complacent, like they can relax. And that is dangerous at this stage. So, Alex is so behind Trump. He won't hear anything bad about him. He's totally hitched himself to that as a way out. And really, there is no political solution. And telling people Trump's going to come in is making people think that it can be fixed at a political level. And even if Trump had the best intentions in the world, I think he'll be too old. He was too weak last time, and it's too big a job for one person to put right, So we talked about Saudi Arabia entering. Yeah, I was going to say, with a lot of these people, you could put George Galloway on that list as well, because while he has an enormous amount of value to say, him and Alex have a lot of value to say, and they have a good knowledge base. But I think they both rely on being melodramatic. They thrive on creating fear porn. They like to hype everything to the max and get people really revved up. But it's part of their way of gaining listeners and getting traction, and yes, they give you a lot of information that's very accurate, but there's always this kind of little detail that if you look into that detail, it kind of makes the rest, you see it in a slightly different way, and it's really not quite what they were saying. It's not really wrong, but it's not quite what they were saying, because they like to ramp everything up to fever pitch and add this whole Shakespearean dramatization over everything. Big thing for this year, guys, is if something seems too interesting or juicy and you're really excited about the ins and outs, it's probably a nothing burger. The really important bits of information are probably on the sidelines, probably appear very dry and won't even get your attention. So remember now, the juicier something feels and the more appealing it's being made by people in the mainstream and the alternate, probably best avoided or paid less attention to than the things that are subtly happening and only a few people are talking about. Here is Polly's updated list, and we can see some of the people. She's got some people from US television. There's no one really here from British television. But I noticed Stephen Crowder was in here down there, and I think Tim Pool is here somewhere. Anyone else we missed from the last? I wouldn't even recognize Tim Pool if I saw him here, because I don't know much about him. We've got Steve Bannon, which is, should be there. I tell you, another one who's missing is Mike Adams, because I used to like him quite a lot, and then More recently, I've seen he's just another kind of fear porn guy. So, and someone who massively over-exaggerates and overstates everything. So yeah, I just thought that was very interesting that a couple of accounts are picking up on what my thinking about the year in terms of these. So there you go. If there's anything else that I can add, I'll think about it just now. But there you go. Oh, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, does anyone else I recognize there? Ben Shapiro was there, which is obvious. Some of these people's faces ring a bell, but maybe you'll know who they are. So many new people that you just have doubts over now. But that's good. It's a learning process, and we should all carry on this journey, and it should be decentralized. We should all be making up our own mind and not looking for heroes, because this is all about finding, you know, your own way of understanding what's going on, and no one person has all the answers. That's why it's a mistake to connect yourself too much to one particular person who's telling a version. You know, no one knows the truth. No one knows the full truth. You've got to kind of use your own intuition to guide you towards the most sensible alternatives. I see Polly has actually got Douglas Murray in there as well, and I think that's Megyn Kelly. She could have put Posobiec and Cernovich, and also Stein, that so-called comedian, the conspiracy castle guy. He could well go in there as well. So quite a good list, and of course, obviously Elon Musk. You know what I've been thinking of him for a long, long time. Now, just something else. Now, you know, a lot of people say, oh, China is a threat, right? And yes, it is in many ways. Absolutely it is. And they draw this worldview where it's China, Iran, big bogeyman, Russia also the bogeyman, and then on the other side we've got America, the EU, and Israel. And to an extent, a lot of these people even buy into that in many ways, obviously in slightly more, you know, nuanced or in-depth fashion. But let's have a look. I just wanted to point out some of these. This is from a website, military.com. And here it will say, Israel passes US military technology to China. The head of defense exports for the Israeli Defense Ministry resigned after a US investigation concluded that technology, including a miniature refrigeration system manufactured by Recor and used for missiles and in electro-optic equipment, was sent to China, according to Israeli newspaper Mariv. Another Israeli site, Aretz Shiva, reports the US is concerned the technology could ultimately find its way to Iran, which last year sought to buy military equipment from China for its nuclear program. So why are they trying to pretend to you that they're these different countries, you know, and they all against each other? They're all cooperating at the highest level. Here we go again. We have, this is from Haaretz, right? Haaretz website. And it says, opinion, how long can Trump bully Israel to downgrade ties with China? 3 years ago, Netanyahu told a Beijing audience that Israel-China ties were a marriage made in heaven. Since then, Israel has folded to intense US pressure to roll back their Chinese investment. But how long will it last? Well, I suppose once Trump was gone, that was the end of that, was the answer to that question. This is an interesting page on Wikipedia. It says China-Israel relations, very detailed. I'd just like to mention this part to you. Military relationships, there you go. It says Israel was ready to sell China the EL/M/2075 Falcon, an Israeli airborne early warning radar system, better known as AWACS, until the United States forced it to cancel the deal. Some estimate that Israel sold arms worth $4 billion to China during this period. China looked to Israel for arms and military technology that it couldn't acquire from the United States, Europe, and Russia. Israel is now China's second largest foreign supplier of arms after Russia, with China having purchased a wide variety of military equipment and technology, including communication satellites. China is a vital market for Israel's aerospace, space, and defense industry. Okay, the US Defense Intelligence Agency compiled evidence that Israel had transferred missile, laser, and aircraft technology to China in the 1990s as well. In 1999, the Defense Minister of China, Chi Haotian, flew to Israel and met with Ehud Barak of Epstein Island fame, then Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Israel, and they reached several high-level agreements, including a $1 billion Israeli-Russian sale of military aircraft to China. So you just see how they, obviously there's lots more to read there, but I don't want to make it a boring stream by reading it out. So it just goes to show you there's a lot going on. It's a lot more complex. The fault lines aren't necessarily where they're telling you they are, and that includes the people that Polly's talking about. Okay, go well, guys.